Hey, it's Mose. Welcome back to another video. Have you ever stopped and taken a moment to just look around you in Monster Hunter? Just take in the environment around you and notice all the little details? I'm sure you have. Monster Hunter as a series is about the environment and the world as much as it is about the monsters. But have you ever taken note of something especially peculiar that made you really stop and think for a moment? Maybe it's something in the map, out of bounds, or even a musical track or ambient sound. The types of peculiar and unusual things that spur the imagination and give added depth to the world. Today, I'm going to take you around to some of my personal favorite places of this type throughout the series. Maybe I'll show you something you've never seen before, or maybe you'll find a new appreciation for something you never thought much of. Before we begin, I do want to remind you to subscribe if you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like, and maybe even a comment if it suits you. I also have a playlist of my other Monster Hunter videos you may enjoy, so go check that out too. Thanks. Our first stop is all the way back in 1st Gen, though you can find this in any version of Forest and Hills too. It's Room 7, the Veggie Elder room. Ambient music is used in a number of places throughout the Monster Hunter series, especially in Old Gen, but I think this room specifically is quite special. In 1st Gen, you're likely to encounter this room very quickly as you start to play, coming out of the tutorial quests and getting to explore the map freely for the first time. You're likely to stumble upon this small alcove full of nothing but trees, a pond, a honey node, and a strange old man. The ambient track creates an atmosphere of someplace ethereal and relaxing, like taking a break from the chaos of dealing with monsters out in the woods. It's a fine place to pull out your barbecue or do some crafting in peace. I think places like this are one of Old Gen's biggest charms, places that just ooze atmosphere. The limited nature of Old Gen maps also benefits these rooms. You can imagine that this area is through a long, winding, well-hidden tunnel, tucked away amongst the dense trees, hard to find for people or monsters both. This illusion would be ruined in a modern open map to some extent. Old Gen maps in general did a sense of scale very well. Even though maps were obviously limited by the hardware at the time, they did a lot to make it feel like the area you were in was actually much larger. Things like being able to see off the cliffs of Forest and Hills into distant mountains, or the Aptonoth across the river near the entrance. There's a whole world that exists outside the immediate area you're able to actually play in. I think that itself is also something that inspires a sense of wonder. Forest and Hills is a map I've always wanted to get remade into a modern game just to be able to explore more of it. Slingshotting our way forward into 4th Gen, we find ourselves in the dense, mountainous jungles of the Primal Forest. A notable feature of which is the multitude of skeletons that litter the area. It's the most prominent of these skeletons that is our cause for stopping here. Draped over Room 5, we find a truly gigantic skeleton, and if we head up to Room 8, you can actually look out into the distance and see the whole thing, including the head. That skull doesn't seem to match any monster we've ever seen, and it's way too big to be something we fought anyway. This thing would make Lao Shan look small. I think sights like this are just fantastic. It adds so much depth and realism to the world, and it evokes a similar feeling to seeing fossils in real life. What kind of animal was this? What time did it live in? What was the world like at the time? Especially in a fantasy setting, like Monster Hunter, it draws so much speculation. We have evidence of very ancient civilizations in the Monhun universe, so we can guess about whether a monster like this was alive at the same time as them, or was this skeleton ancient even for them? If things this big were alive at the same time as humans, were they able to hunt them, or was this a gargantuan horror that was to be avoided at all costs? It makes you want to hear more about the very ancient prehistory ecology, but at the same time, some things are better left to the imagination. Having unsolvable mysteries you can only speculate on is exciting too. We're doing a lot of time traveling here, but bear with me. Rewind back to 1st Gen. Here in the misty and vine-covered jungle, we find remnants of an ancient civilization, but perhaps not the one you're thinking of. When we talk about ancient civilizations in Monster Hunter, we often think of the one that built the tower. But here in the jungle we have ruins that don't look anything like the tower. In fact, they look much older, but no less impressive. You can find the remains of buildings, pillars, roads, and statues scattered around. Clearly much of what was here has been reclaimed by the jungle with time. I find the Gen 1 jungle to be very interesting because it's one of the very few examples we have of a long-lost civilization in the Monhun universe that we truly know nothing about. There's scattered lore about the people who built the tower, but as far as I know, nothing exists for who built these ruins. Much like the skeleton in the Primal Forest, it leaves so many questions. Who were these people? What time period did they live in? What was their society like? What are those statues meant to represent? So little is known about these people, it's entirely possible they could be from the same time as the people who built the tower, just a group of people who lived in a different place and maybe their buildings didn't survive the test of time as well. There's nothing you can really say that isn't just pure speculation. Like in the previous section, mysteries like these are usually better left as mysteries. It's interesting to look back at places like this because for the most part, Monster Hunter quickly abandoned this world history angle in their map design. You don't see as many physical remnants of old civilizations in more recent generations, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does make things like this have a very distinct old-gen vibe to them, which I think also adds to their mystique. You could imagine an alternate timeline where human civilization history took a more prominent role in the series, and ancient ruins got expanded lore and more focus in the design of the maps, but that's only a dream at this point. One last stop before we leave first gen for good here, and it's going to be a quick one. We're here in the swamp, room 3. Let me just pull out my binoculars here so we can get a closer look. Nice and pixelated. For real though, look at that. Out in the distance, there appears to be large trees or potentially some kind of tower. I'm opting for trees since you can kind of see a root maybe on the side. These other things over here are definitely trees. I think this is a pretty interesting sight. We don't see any trees that large in the game anywhere, not until later games at least. Those are pretty clearly far in the distance, so they'd have to be pretty gigantic up close. Now if we turn around, we can see this skybox texture is actually copied several times. Is this area actually surrounded by 4 massive trees? That'd certainly be an incredible natural feature. However, it's much more likely that they just copied it, because who looks at skyboxes anyway? Who's to say though? We spent a lot of time in Gen 1, and that's not because I particularly favor it or anything, but because many aspects of Gen 1 are really just an enigma, I feel. It has a certain vibe in the way it portrays the world and environment that I don't think has ever been replicated in the series. It gives it this feeling of a world shrouded in mystery, being dropped into a place that's too big for you, full of many things you don't understand and are not meant to understand. You're there to hunt monsters and survive, but there's clearly more to see and know in the world. The only thing you can do is witness and wonder. Next up, we're going over to a game I've never talked about on this channel almost at all, mainly because I don't like it that much, but that's beside the point. It's Generations Ultimate. We're here in the Jurassic Frontier for a couple things. Firstly, if we head down to room 10, we can find the corpse of a Shen Gowron. But I do find things like this very thought-provoking, seeing very large monsters like Shen Gowron, who you normally only fight within a specific arena map outside that context. Despite the way we fight them in the games, it reminds you that these are actually just normal monsters out in the world. Realistically, you could encounter them in a number of locations. It's only a gameplay feature that makes you encounter them in just one place. It's something I've always wanted to see represented in the games in some form. Imagine being able to see a Lao Shan lumbering through a forest in the distance. I'm sure it would be hard to implement, but getting to see very massive monsters out in the actual world would be really hype. Maybe in Wilds? Wishful thinking, perhaps? Moving on from here, we're going to go up to room 1 real quick. This is actually something I only noticed when making this video, but look out in the pond. Is that a monster? It just swims around in a circle. If it's a monster, I don't think it looks like anything we know of. That's really wild. Bring back underwater, you cowards. I want to go see what this dude looks like. Even for someone like me who's played every game extensively, there's still new things to see. What a treat. Our final stop on this little journey of ours is in 2nd Gen. You were probably expecting this place to show up eventually, and indeed, we're at the tower. Not just the tower in general, in particular, we're heading to the top. My favorite place in the whole series. As we make our way up there, I can give a little history lesson for those of you who may have only experienced the tower in the portable games. Back in DOS, which is where the tower was originally from, it was actually split up into several maps that allowed you to access different areas. Some of which, like the special exploration zone that you fight the Metal Wraths in, requiring certain key items to be found in order to access them. Simulating the experience of needing to map out and prepare an expedition to discover new areas of this mysterious and unknown location. Additionally, these rooms where you ascend to the tower's peak also had steps rather than ramps, which you had to slowly climb. It does call into question who this tower was built for, considering the hostility of getting to the top. The ramp makes a lot more sense if this was supposed to be traversed by people. The slow ascent did make getting to the top to fight Lunastra for the first time pretty special. Anyway, we're getting off track here. We're at the top. The side of the tower's peak is truly one of a kind in Monster Hunter, at the top of the world above even the Cloud Later. It actually kind of reminds me of Corrin's tower from Dragon Ball. The line written here is, "I want to sip on Lunastra's water." There appears to have been some kind of mistake. My apologies. Getting back on track. The real reason I'm up here isn't just because of the sights, it's actually the sounds. Have you ever been up here when there's no monsters? There's actually not that many quests that allow you to do this. Usually the monster you're here to fight either spawns up here or is someplace else, so you don't have a reason to be here without a monster present. There's a Remobra slaying quest in Freedom Unite that you can come here during, or in Dose you could run ahead of Yamatsukami and come to the top before he gets here. If you come here without a monster present, you're met with this. Not that. This. An ethereal, haunting, but serene, ambient track. It really makes this place feel otherworldly, like you've left this world and have ended up someplace different entirely, which is fitting considering this is where you fight an anomaly like White Fatalis as well. I really think this is the most striking and enigmatic zone in the whole series, and it's a place that's very special to me. Well, I hope you enjoyed this walk through some of the many unusual and interesting places to be found in the Monster Hunter world. Let me know what some of your favorite places are in the comments. That's all from me for now. See ya.